You're listening to episode 54 of the ESL Teaching Podcast. Last week, I shared part one of my coaching call with one of the amazing members of the ESL Teaching Roadmap. Although our conversation focused only on 3 questions, the answers to 2 of them you heard in a previous episode, these questions were big and broad. And in today's episode, we are zeroing in on teaching literature to English learners. How do we approach working with Romeo and Juliet? What are some tips and resources for teaching literary elements? What are effective ways to engage students in writing? And the ever-present question, what about phonics for older students? The second part of our conversation is just as powerful as the first one, and I cannot wait to hear what you thought of it. All right, let's get started. Hello and welcome to the ESL Teaching Podcast. I'm your host, Yeva Grossless, otherwise known as simply Yeva, and I am so thankful that you tuned in. I'm looking forward to sharing both my knowledge and experience on this podcast, as well as that of my fellow teachers. Let's see, I think there was another question again, a big one.
I'm so sorry.
No need to apologize. So this one, I actually just recorded a podcast episode about how to teach English language arts to English learners. So
Yes, this is like the the major question. I'm just like, what do I do?
But also it's an ongoing question and answer, right? So you know, if and when you have time, episode 51 is the one. It's coming out actually tomorrow, you know, January 24th. So, but the basic premise is the way, and I think it's in any content area, the students are not going to be able to do any higher order thinking skills if they do not have the basics of understanding, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, like, can they read something in their first language if they're able to? And if you have the resources, have them read, I don't know, Romeo and Juliet in Spanish or Portuguese or whatever other language. Mm-hmm. And, you know, then you can kind of like go into the discussion, you know, about what the content is, you know. So if you have, I have made some summaries of books, like I know that my students study American literature, so American literature is not always easy to come by in other languages. So I try to summarize with pictures. So I do like a little Google Slides presentation. Let's say I give an example of the things they carried. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but it's like a collection of Vietnam stories from Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. And so if you can summarize, you know, story in little parts and put like an image, you know, and highlight the most important words, that will be your understanding lesson. Because you know, if they don't understand, then you're going to be overwhelmed and the information is not going to be accurate. And the students are going to be overwhelmed. You know, I'm doing it just to do it because I have no idea what they're asking me. So if you can find ways to bring content to them, so that would be one. The other way is pre-teaching vocabulary. So you mentioned Romeo and Juliet, and there are Romeo and Juliets, even in English, that are adapted specifically for English learners. So I don't know if you have.
Yes. Our district, I think we just purchased a subscription with Saddleback, and so an adapted version, which my coordinator she hasn't purchased yet, but I sent the link and everything. So we are going to get that, which I'm really excited about, because I thought, how in the world am I going to teach Romeo and Juliet? So that should arrive soon. Yeah. And I think that'll be really, really helpful.
Yeah. And I think, again, vocabulary, you know, not all vocabulary has to be taught, but maybe you know, like if it pertains to, let's say, characters, right? The main
Mhm.
characters, or if it pertains to, let's say, an assignment that you're gonna say, like, you have to argue who's to blame for the death of Romeo and Juliet, right? So, you know,
Mhm.
the word argue and persuade, and, you know, like all of the things that go into that. So, vocabulary pre-teaching, every single lesson, I at the start of the lesson, I literally put my opening slide, the do now. And the do now
Mhm.
sometimes is, you know, what does this mean? You know, write on the
Mhm.
whiteboard and show me, you know, whether
Mhm.
they remember, whether they are able to use it in a sentence, and so on. And then also chunking information.
Mhm.
Do they need to know the whole story, or do they,
Mhm.
will they be able to get what they need from the crucial parts of the story, the
Mhm.
balcony scene, for example,
Mhm.
or how Juliet goes to the um, father Lawrence to get the poison, or the conflict scene. So, you know, do they need to do that? You know, maybe you can summarize the rest of the story, you know,
Mhm.
and see if you can chunk the information and present it in that way.
Have you ever done, and this might be on your course, but I haven't checked, doing like a novel study? That is something I'd like to do with like my higher level students, um, because I know that with the on level courses, they do Animal Farm in the fall, and then in the spring, I think they do, I can't remember what they do, but I know they do like two novels, and then they also do Romeo and Juliet, which I haven't done a novel yet, because I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
keep my head above water. But I think it's something valuable that I would like to do with them. I just don't know, A, which novel, and then, B, like, how do I do it at their level? And what information do I include? What do I leave out? Like,
Yeah.
so.
So I have a couple of suggestions. One that my students did as part of curriculum, and it's very easy to read too, and it's very captivating. A book is called "A Very Vast Expanse of Sea," and it's by I think it's Iranian author, or I'm not sure, you know, what country, but
Mhm.
Tahere Mafi. I think I will write in the chat, you know.
Okay.
So it's about a girl from a Muslim family who I think
Mhm.
was born in the US or was, you know, like, or moved when she was very little, but the parents, you know, escaped the country to find, you know, good life here. And
Mhm.
she wears a hijab, and she's a teenager, and she falls in love with this boy, and this boy, like, it's just like, it's a whole, it's very, very relatable. It's very historically also interesting, because the setting is right after 9/11, you know, so like the people's perception
Mhm.
and all that.
Mhm.
But my students loved it because it is very highly relatable to anybody. It's not difficult to read,
Okay.
and the characters are compelling. So I highly recommend. And I had a newcomer and an intermediate that were reading this book, and my one of my students said that, you know, Miss G, I never thought I would like reading, but after this book, I think I want to try another one by that. So,
That's awesome.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And then the other one that I didn't do a novel study, but one of my students asked, and one of my, you know, colleagues gave to me, is Love in English. It's
Okay.
yeah, I can't remember the author now, but yeah, Love in English. A girl
Mhm.
from Argentina comes to America, again, moving and everything, and she's like, I don't even know. And it's very good for like English learners, because they can probably relate right in the beginning.
Yeah.
She thinks it's written English, and then dot dot dot. I have no idea what this says, and then English, and then dot dot dot. So that would be really helpful for your students, and you can then pull any literary elements that you want from it.
Yeah.
And, you know, like any writing or any presentations and anything. I think keeping kids interested is one of the bigger things, you know. So I think those two
Mhm. Yeah.
might really really work well.
Yeah, that's been something I've just been struggling with is what are they interested in?
Yeah,
Because I have so many different. So most of my students are all from the same country, which is really interesting. But their personal interests are all so different.
yeah,
So I'm kind of trying to balance that and then figure out. It makes it easy in one sense because they all speak. Most of them. I have a few that don't, but most of them all speak the same language and are from the same country. So in that regard, like it's nice because I can do a lot of things that are really geared specifically towards them.
yeah,
But then also some of them are, so interested in different things that like finding a novel or finding material that's going to work for the entire class. Like I kind of struggle with that because I want all of them to be engaged.
yeah,
But I know that some topics are not going to be interesting to some of them. And I don't want anybody getting, I don't want to have to deal with a lot of like, okay, stay on task and like, those sort of behavioral issues that come up when they're just simply bored because they're not interested in it,
yeah.
which I know is common in every class, but it's just,
It is hard, but
I
it's
don't know.
also hard to,
Yeah, it's hard. Like,
yeah.
so
So, but I think if 50% is interested, that's already half the battle. You know,
yeah.
it's really hard to find something that everybody, you know, likes.
Mhm.
But you know, I always try to bring to life and everything, you know, and just see like, how would you
Mhm.
feel in a situation like this, or have you ever experienced, or just kind of like bringing it home, you know, like it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily have to be the same nationality or the same language, but the human
Mhm.
experiences are across the board, and you know, it's kind of like overarching themes. So
Yeah.
try it out, and I would like to hear, you know, whether they liked it. But I know that
Yeah,
this
I
was a
will.
huge success. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for those suggestions. I'm definitely going to look them up after this video and see what I can find.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I do have, if you want to target a certain literary elements, for example, if
Mhm.
your students are not, you know, fully familiar with like character traits or inferencing
Mhm.
or something like that, I do have in step 3,
Mhm.
the Ascend. There are short stories that you can read. They are, I have never had an indifferent kid, because those short stories, they're like, and then it's like an unexpected ending, and they're like, oh,
Yes.
why did he do that? So That works. I have the short leaf, the last leaf by O.
Okay.
Henry. Um, and there's also Lamb to the Slaughter. It's kids.
Yes, it's a
Yes.
good one.
Yeah. So I have like a
A classic I read, yeah.
Yeah. I always like one of my favorites is and I always talk about it everywhere. Gift of the Magi. It can be
Yes,
good
I love
for
that one.
Christmas or for Valentine's Day. And again, I have like created slides with lesson suggestions on how you can go. And they all
I actually used your gift of the Magi this year. I did it around Christmas, and I used the slides that you provided.
Yeah. Oh,
So
I'm glad.
it went really well, which I love that one, and I was super passionate about it. So
Yeah.
they all liked it. The twist at the end is just too much for them sometimes.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, because I use it almost every year. I mean, I have the same students every year, so I have to kind of like put a twist on everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And then the other one is the short films. If you want to like the theme, for example, what is the theme? You show them. I have like a one-man band. Again, you will find it in that same section, step 3, ascend. So it's kind of like, what is the lesson? What is the theme of the whole story? And it also, I try to put some grammar in there, like what verb do we have to use? What tense do we have to use? So, it's not only like literary terms, but also a little bit of grammar. So these are always helpful. And if you have a little bit of like leeway, that will carry you through for, a couple months, so.
Thank you.
So yeah, so these are some of the ways that you can do the teach like the content of language arts. And then we can also like immediately go into like writing and reading, right? So what was the strategy up until now in the reading and writing area? Like, do you have anything in particular that you work with the students for writing, or like how do you go about teaching them writing?
So we haven't done a whole lot. Last semester we did our personal narrative, and I scaffold a lot. I just found, I think it was on Teacher Pay Teacher or on the internet. I can't remember exactly where, but it was like, just a little box, and it had, the first kind of sentence that you were supposed to write. And it just went step by step. I think it was on Teacher Pay Teacher. It was like an entire, one of those units that you just walk through it day by day. How did it make you feel? Who was there? When did it happen? Kind of step by step like that. So that's kind of what I did for their personal narrative. And then as far as like, I've done a few other things with like them summarizing articles or retelling or like recalling information, which has been really helpful. And then with their research, I do have it broken down kind of step by step, like the background or the kind of like the background intro. And I've given them a lot of sentence starters. So really they're just taking the information that they found on the internet and putting it into a paragraph form with a lot of help in that area. So that's really all I've done so far as with writing. And last semester I did start doing like some mini grammar lessons, but I kind of didn't stick with it through the rest of the semester. And that's something I wanted to do this semester, was kind of bring that back, like when I have extra time or kind of have like time in between a unit to kind of throw in some grammar, because most of them have pretty decent grammar, but they could definitely improve. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on it, but it is something that I think is valuable. And one other area that they really struggle with is their spelling. So some of them are such terrible spellers, and I don't know, it's only a few out of the group, so I don't know that I necessarily want to focus, tons of lessons on that. But for the ones that do struggle with that, I'm like, they definitely need that targeted practice, but I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. So for spelling, I think a lot of, especially older students, they probably never got like any phonics instruction the way we got
Mm-hmm.
it. So it is a hard thing. So sometimes what I do is I literally kind of like do a mini lesson. I'm not trained in phonics, but I know like the basic rules of, how to form words. So at least
Mm-hmm.
giving them like a targeted, like if I see that there's a problem that is repeated, I will do like a mini phonics lesson, like the consonant vowel consonant, like, or the silent E, and then kind of like break
Mm-hmm.
down the words and see, if they can see the patterns and everything. I just ordered a phonics program from Saddleback as well. For newcomers, it's too hard because I tried it with my newcomer and it was too hard for him. However, I think it works well for people who are like level 2s and 3s, but they can't figure out how to spell. It has like high interest,
Mm-hmm.
um, books. One of them was actually scary. I'm not into scary stuff, but it was like, some horror, story. But they do start with the CVC words. They also like go into like the genre and the comprehension. So it's kind of like well-rounded, I wouldn't,
Mm-hmm.
with newcomers, I would probably just take the pattern and just several sentences and just kind of like repeat it that way. Um,
Do you know what the name of it was?
I think it's the Saddleback phonics program. I can
Okay.
probably look it up. But if you go on their website, they have one for tween. So the one is for tweens and the other one is for teens. Okay, so I got I
Okay.
got both. So, but it's like the phonics program in a box, and it comes with books
Okay.
and the lessons. And so that might be something like mini lessons that if you have time, to grab and to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the same with grammar. If you want to focus on grammar in context, maybe your students are struggling with past tense, right? So when they read a story, it's a good combination. Like stories are typically written in the past, or in the present simple, and then you focus on that and have them find the words, or maybe see if they notice what's the similar with the verbs. So and that way. But in terms of, to improve reading, you have to read, and to improve writing, you
Mm-hmm.
have to write. So if whichever unit, every unit, should probably include some sort of different writing, journaling every day, kind of,
Yes.
it's, I don't always stick with it. I'll be honest. I
Mm-hmm.
personally don't always stick with it because sometimes I just don't have the topic that I, come,
Yeah.
and sometimes it doesn't make sense, to
Mm-hmm.
just like write anything randomly. But it is good, one of those do now when they come in and
Mm-hmm.
just say, hey, like journal about this, or what
Yes.
you
I
know,
this semester I decided that I wanted to do like gratitude journals. So
yeah.
just once a week though. So I think on Wednesdays, they'll just come in, get their journal, and then write what they were grateful for the past week. But I really liked the idea of doing some kind of writing, like bell work, every day, or not every day, but every week that and then they can look back on it too. And it is like a good
Yeah, just to
kind of,
see how far they've come too,
mhm,
I like to take some topics from their content area, like for example, what would you be like a Renaissance man, like, because if you're talking
mhm,
about like Romeo and Juliet, like, do you agree or disagree, or like, what would you be interested, or how would
mhm,
you do things, why do you think Da Vinci's ideas took so many years to take off, and just kind of like little ideas to connect to the content area. And again, no
mhm.
judgment zone for this one. They can just write, and your newcomer can be involved too, because he can write in the first language. I do
Mhm.
typically, when I post a question, I do translate it, and I do make sure that my newcomer responds, and he has the best answers out of all of them. So now the students are like, oh, tell him to answer because I want to see what he has to say. So,
That's awesome.
Yeah. So again, it's just kind of like practice and mini lessons in grammar and and phonics here and there, and just kind of like going with your content and seeing if you can put a twist on it, whether with a journal or maybe, even a full blown like a narrative, pretend you so and so.
Yeah. I have a really great book that I ordered last semester that I haven't used, but I would like to in the future. And it kind of gives them like a, um, like a prompt, like a writing prompt, and then they have to finish the story. But it's meant to be really short, so not something that they can do. They could do it like every day, like a different prompt, and it's just like a one paragraph or something. But I just haven't tried it yet, but I really like the idea of them at least becoming more comfortable coming in, writing every day or once a week or so, so that when we do these big projects like a research paper, they're not just completely thrown off guard and completely shocked. Like, so I really like the idea of kind of doing these small little things along the way to kind of help them prepare for the bigger things when they come up.
Yeah, and then one more idea. Again, it's no, like I said, no grading, no judgment. But once they get comfortable, I have found something to be really effective to provide color-coded feedback. So, for example, like you can highlight the word, like you can give them instructions, write about this using 3 of the new vocabulary words that we learned this week, right? So you can highlight, let's say green color would be like, check your wording, or yellow, check your tenses, or, purple would be like the sentence structure. And once they learn the code, so you give them like the key of what each color means, once they learn the code, and if done consistently, you will start seeing improvements. And this is kind of like teaching without teaching, so.
Yeah, I really like that idea because right now I'm sharing. So all of them have shared their Google Doc with me for their research paper, but I'm having to go in and then individually edit. And like, it would be so much easier to just color code it instead of having to go in and write each little comment. Like, it's a lot of work, and I don't mind because I think it's valuable, but it's a lot of effort on my end, and I am trying to juggle everything else. So that would make a huge improvement on like the efficiency of my class, because I feel like I spend so much time just like trying to check their work, and it takes too much time away from like instruction time that I could be, we could be doing other things. So
absolutely. Well, do you have any other questions?
No, I think that's it. You've been so gracious. Thank you so much for tackling some of those big questions. I know, like, it's a lot. And I'm, like I said, my district's really supportive. They're more than willing to like order whatever we need and help us. It's just that we don't really have any guidance right now. We're all, we all want to be here all. I don't know really where we're going. So like we don't know how to prepare. And the teacher that they hired in the high school, she's been teaching ELA for 20 years. So in that regard, she's very knowledgeable, but she doesn't have the ESL component of it. And so that's been really hard for her. And then the teacher that they had hired at the middle school, he was actually bilingual and had taught ESL for, I think, maybe 10 years. So he had that side of it. And then, of course, I've taught ESL. So we all had really good like backgrounds, and we were able to kind of work together. But it's just, and then aligning our courses was the other big thing that I really hope that we can kind of sort that out, because especially with me and the high school teacher, I want to make sure, I'm not teaching what she's teaching and so on and so forth. So just getting all of that kind of hammered out, I think would really help. But then in the meantime, for me individually, learning how to teach ELA as opposed to just ESL, it's been a really big challenge, but I love it. I
think
don't
you're
know
on
that
the
I.
right track. I think you probably even like being too hard on yourself because, from what I'm hearing, you already have an idea. You have ways to approach students. So, now that you have like maybe more ideas and some, actually
Mhm.
guided resources where you can find them, this will help you even more. So, again, if you have any other questions, you can book another call. And again, as long as you're a member of the ESL Teaching Roadmap, these
Mhm.
are, I don't have like any limit for them right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it's been really beneficial, and thank you so much. The guided materials are really helpful. Like I said, I used the Gifts of the Magi one around Christmas time, and I did see. I think there was something about Romeo and Juliet, which I'm not worrying about that yet because I'm just trying to get through research.
There's a Romeo and Juliet. What I have is compare and contrast the West Side Story with the balcony scene. So I think the kids get the kick out of that because the West Side
Yeah.
Story that I'm using is the old one. So it's even, so there's like all these things, but it is.
I love the new movie. It's so good, though.
I didn't see the new one, so.
Oh, it's so good. So,
Yeah.
so good. I loved it. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
well,
fantastic.
I'm gonna have to check it out then. Yeah, so
Yeah,
the
I
Romeo and
had.
Juliet is also there. You can just go in and see if that works for you, or if you want to put a twist on it, and so on.
Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. I know that I kind of have so many questions, but you've been really, really helpful,
Yeah.
and I really appreciate it because I mean, without the internet, to be honest, I don't know where I would be. Like, I'm so glad that I can Google and Pinterest and teachers pay teachers like that. Those things have helped me so much because we are literally starting from scratch and we're building everything as we go, and it's a lot of work.
Yes, I know. And I'm so glad you reached out, and I'm so glad we had this conversation. So, um, thank you. And there you have it. Here is a little recap of our conversation. We talked about resources that you can use to teach literary elements such as short stories and short films. We touched upon how to teach grammar and phonics to our English learners in a practical and not overwhelming way. We also came up with ideas on how to incorporate writing into daily instruction, the topics for writing, as well as how to provide feedback that is effective and saves you, the teacher, time. Let us know what you thought of this episode by leaving a review wherever you listen to the ESL Teaching Podcast. As always, I love to hear your thoughts. Ask your questions, whether it's in the reviews or by sending me a direct message on Instagram or in our Facebook group. I read all the messages and reviews, and your question might become a topic of a podcast episode right here on the ESL Teaching Podcast. Thank you for listening, and until next time. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you loved what you heard today, be sure to do two things. First, make sure to subscribe to the ESL Teaching Podcast so you don't miss an episode. And second, leave a positive review wherever you listen, on iTunes, Spotify, or any other platform. Positive reviews will improve the chances of this podcast to be discovered in the feed and help our fellow ESL ELL teachers. And of course, there's a third thing. If you aren't following me on social media yet, come join me on Instagram at SimplyYevaESL, Facebook, Simply Yeva, or connect with me on my website, simplyyeva.com. Thanks again, and until next time.